Mary was a very key piece to representing local government when we were working on writing the cohesive strategy. It was really important that this not be a top-down approach, but that it was a locally led grassroots effort as well. We knew that it wouldn't be successful if it were only one of those. And the group that was working on this, the national level group was the Wildland Fire Leadership Council. And from the Wildland Fire Leadership Council today, we have the Northeast coordinator. Larry, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Ann. I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you all. I know we're a little short of time on this segment, and I'm going to be talking quite a bit more detail about the cohesive strategy, and especially in the Northeast here in the next segment. So I'll just take this opportunity to introduce myself. I'm again Larry Mastic. I'm the coordinator for the Northeast region, one of the three committees formed by the Wildland Fire Leadership Council, the WFLC, that I'll be talking a little bit more about here shortly. And also I want to acknowledge the chair of our Northeast Regional Committee. He wasn't able to join us today, but his name is Dave Salino, and he's the Chief Fire Warden for the state of Massachusetts. So just suffice to say, really glad to have this opportunity to visit with you. We are, the purpose of our committee basically is to facilitate partnerships among all the entities that are involved in delivering wildland fire management activities, planning, et cetera, across the 20-state region. So I'll just stop there and I'll get into a little more detail here in my presentation coming up. Thank you.
Sounds good, Larry. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of the folks that were doing introductions and your comments during the leadership welcome. It was really, really insightful to know where you're at and to know that you're on the ground, at the ground level, what you're managing and who you're involved with and what groups you're on. Unfortunately, Chris has had to leave, and so he is not available for questions. But that'll wrap up our leadership welcome, and I will turn it over to you, Larry, for our Cohesive Strategy 101.
Okay, thanks, Ann.
Thank you.
I'll just go ahead and finish a little bit more of my background. I was born and raised in Syracuse, New York, so I have roots in the Northeast. I did I worked for the U.S. Forest Service for 35 years, retiring in 2010 as the Deputy Area Director for the Northeastern Area State and Private Forestry. I wasn't retired very long before I got recruited and to help with the development of the cohesive strategy in terms of building its the assessments and the plans that we use as the foundation for our action plans that we use in our work. So let me go ahead and share the screen here if I can. Can you see that?
Yep. Looks good, Larry.
Let's see if I can get the slideshow to come up here. There we go. Okay.
Looks good.
All right, thanks. Okay, as I mentioned, these are examples of some of the national and the regional plans that we use as the foundation for delivering the cohesive strategy. Our partners and organizations are guided by these documents, and we continue to work on keeping them current as things evolve. As has been mentioned by several of the previous speakers, there are three national cohesive strategy goals. The short versions are restoring resilient landscapes, creating fire adapted communities, and responding to wildfires. Um, as the diagram on the right illustrates, these are all they overlap, they're interrelated, and they're all grounded in science. We had a really robust national science team that helped put together these the documents that provide the foundation for the cohesive strategy. Just a real brief timeline of the cohesive strategy. As was mentioned, it started in 2009, and the foundation was really the FLAME Act, which is a long acronym, but basically this was the piece of legislation that enacted the cohesive strategy. From there, as Ann and others have alluded to, there was teams that put together the various components, like the vision, the wording for the goals, the approach that would be used, founded in collaboration and science. Also, while it was already in existence, this sort of reinvigorated the Wildland Fire Leadership Council, and they formed the three regional strategy committees that we've been referring to. All these are based on a national MOU signed by the Secretaries of the Interior and the Department of Agriculture. And there's a set of charters for each of the regional strategy committees. Like I said, there was several years of work to develop the analysis, the assessments, and the action plans that form the foundation for the cohesive strategy. There's a national strategy and action plan also that was final and approved in 2014. Regional action plans like the Northeast one were updated and published tied to that national strategy and action plan. And we continue to provide 5-year updates for all these foundational documents. And then the focus really turned to implementation, coordination, which I'll go into in a little bit more detail. One of the beauties of the cohesive strategy is the regional approach that recognizes the differences in wildfire related impacts, conditions, the ecology, all those kind of differences. While there's some common underlying themes, there are a lot of differences on the ground, as you all know, about fire conditions and fuels conditions and things like that. So each region has worked on developing its own set of priorities to work on challenges and barriers and advance the cohesive strategy, which I'll go into a little more detail here. The way I've alluded to, the cohesive strategy is organized. Like I said, it's led by the Wildland Fire Leadership Council, and there are three regions that were chartered by the WFLC, as we call it. And they reflect a variety of memberships, and I'll go into that here shortly too. This is a list. I'm not going to read this, of course, but this is a list of the WFLC membership. It's basically 19 organizations made up of federal, state, local, NGO, and others like the International Association of Fire Chiefs and so on. This is the formal organization. They meet quarterly. Members vary, of course, by, as you can see, these are the leaders of many of these national organizations, and many of them, the leaders turn over during administration changes and things like that. But one of the key aspects of it is a few years ago, they hired an executive director. His name is Mike Zupko, in case you don't know but he helps he serves as the glue to keep this organization functioning and meeting regularly. And as you can see there highlighted in red, this organization is chaired by the Department of Agriculture and the Department of the Interior. Okay. And they also come up with and identify a set of priorities that focus on delivering the 3 goals from a national perspective, and these are them. I'm not going to go into a lot of them in detail, but hopefully you'll recognize some of these kind of things. They're all grounded in the cohesive strategy, of course, but increasing active management has been talked about before. Lack of sufficient forest management is often an issue and a causation of some of our wildland fire issues. Reducing risk to communities, smoke management and air quality are important and difficult to tackle components of treating the landscapes like through prescribed fire, which I'll talk about more here in a bit. Integrating technology and data across systems. There's, as you all are probably familiar in your own line of work, getting good data and getting consistent data is always a challenge, and it's important to keep a focus on that. Mitigating post-fire impacts has been discussed a little bit earlier. That's a challenge, especially for our partners in the West, from some of these big, large wildfires. And then there's a whole myriad of issues regarding the workforce, both in capacity and other issues. So those are the current priorities for the WFLC. Then turning to the Northeast, these are our Regional Strategy Committee members. We have representatives from all these folks. There's more than 50 organizations here, including the 20 states, but a wide variety of federal, state, tribal, local, NGO, other partners. They are not exactly the same as the WFLC, but they represent our regional perspective. And the Southeast and the West have similar but different makeups, but a lot of the same core members. And these are our priorities for the Northeast as they currently exist. And I want to go into these in a little bit more detail because I believe a lot of these may be of interest to many of you. And we have a number of working groups for some of these that are trying to work on implementing them in one form or another. The first one, right now we're reforming this this group, but it's again around the data coordination. We've been focused on land fire for the last few years. Land fire is the sort of the foundational ecology database that serves as the foundation for a lot of our work. And the Northeast was condition of their database. The data from the Northeast was pretty poor a few years ago. We did a lot of work. We actually contracted with a specialist to help us. We've made a lot of progress. And so now we're evolving to other issues like fire occurrence reporting. You would think that's not a big deal, that everybody reports fires, but there's 20 states, there's lots of fire departments, thousands of fire departments, and they all don't quite do it the same. And it gives us a very skewed picture of what's going on. It sounds simple, but it's not. It's a bit challenging to figure this out. Anyway, our next one is our regional wildfire risk assessment and planning. We are in the process in the Northeast of developing an all lands wildfire risk assessment and a portal to help deliver it and deliver a set of tools. you'll be hearing more about this in tomorrow's presentation. But finding out where the wildfire risks are, down to the local level, and helping partners understand it, have a common source to look at it, compare, identify priorities. There's way more work than anybody can handle, so we really need to figure out where the priorities are and where we can get the most bang for the buck at the local level. So this tool you'll be hearing more about, I think will go a long way to help get a common understanding and expand the understanding of the wildfire risk in the Northeast.
And Larry, if I can just jump in real quick and say one thing, it was with that wildfire risk assessment and the portal, there was already interest from the Timmins group to identify a conservation district person to engage in that effort. So I'm super excited to, be able to note that in your presentation that they're looking to get information from conservation districts into this process and coordinating with your group.
Right, that's great, Ann, because like I say, local input and local action is what's going to be needed to make it real.
It is.
Okay, and then prescribed fire coordination. I'll go into this a little bit more detail, but prescribed fire is one of the most cost-effective and resource-effective tools that we have. It's not as prevalent and widespread in the Northeast as is needed in many of our views. The Southeast has kind of a culture of burning that they've been doing for years, and they do, I don't know, magnitude of 20 or 30 times more than what the Northeast does. Which also means there's huge opportunities for prescribed fire use in the Northeast. And we've got a couple of groups working on to help facilitate getting more of that done. Fire adapted communities, again, that ties back a little bit to this risk assessment and planning, knowing where those communities are, helping identify the types of risks they face, and what some of the causal factors of those risks are. They may not just be flat out wildfires. They could be related to things like forest health, watershed conditions, other kinds of things. Both the solutions to those can also be contribute to the solutions to reducing wildfire risk. Engaging the local fire departments, a huge untapped resource. We have some good examples of fire departments that have engaged in the 3 goals of the cohesive strategy, but we're a long ways from where we could be or should be. And we have some efforts going on to try to raise the profile and get more fire departments engaged in the other aspects of the cohesive strategy beyond response. Related to that is resource sharing and availability. There's a lot of sort of bureaucratic barriers to sharing resources. Resources are limited and scarce, and for qualified people to do both wildfire response and prescribed fire. There's a lot of opportunity there, but it takes a multi-jurisdictional, multi-agency approach to trying to resolve some of those barriers. And finally, communications. That's sort of the core of what we do. And I'm going to go into that a little bit more here about the importance and how we tackle it, and would be open to more suggestions as we go through on this conference. And I won't go into this any more detail here, but like I said, we have these current work groups that are tackling some of these priorities that I just mentioned in a variety of ways. And they will be open to having any of you join some of these work groups if you're interested in these particular topics, and you can reach out to Ann or me to figure out how you can get involved. Related to prescribed fire, which I mentioned, where there's a lot of activity going on there, one of our initiatives that we're working with is the Northeast Midwest Regional Prescribed Fire Council Coordinating Group. That's a mouthful, but basically this is a relatively new coordinating body that was chartered by the National Coalition of Prescribed Fire Councils. These are mainly state level councils that help advance the use of prescribed fire in their state. The Northeast is sort of a little bit behind the curve in the regard. We only have 10 prescribed fire councils out of the 20 states. And that's one of the charges of this coordinating group is help some of these other states form a national or state level prescribed fire council. And so there are barriers and issues to doing that. And we are now meeting regularly with the existing Northeast prescribed fire councils to work on some of those issues. And like I mentioned, communication activities, things that we do now or have been doing recently. Especially since COVID started and we had to move to everything online like this conference, we use this as an opportunity to put on some educational webinars about the various wildland fire management tools that exist out there. Things like I've mentioned already, like Landfire. There's a new fire occurrence reporting tool called Inform that we've been promoting. And also the tools that are going to come out with the wildfire risk assessment portal. And other things we do on a regular basis, we produce a monthly newsletter. We have monthly conference calls with our partners. We participate in the national WIFLIC and other regional coordination calls on a monthly basis or quarterly basis. We continue to produce webinars that are focused on our priority topics like engaging fire departments and things like that. And we maintain a website that has a whole list of resources supporting wildland fire management in the Northeast. There are national websites too, but each region has its own regional source. And some of the products that you'll find on this website include one that our Fire Adapted Communities Work Group produced a couple of years ago, this Northeast Wildfire Preparedness Resource Guide. And it was produced by representatives from these organizations here. And you can find it on our website for download. Also similar to that is a Northeast Prescribed Fire Resource Guide that sort of tries to give you easy access to all the different kind of support resources that are out there for prescribed fire. Research, training, educational opportunities, things like that. And this is the website where you can find all this good stuff. And the last, but maybe most important slide is here's some ideas. And I'm sure you can come up with a lot more about how conservation districts could participate and probably are participating in some respects in delivering the cohesive strategy. And just some examples by goal are to support more prescribed fire, to improve things like habitat, watershed performance. It's not all about just reducing wildfire risk. As you can see, there are many other benefits of prescribed fire. And working with other partners like fire departments, state forestry, even working to help form a prescribed burn association can all be of benefit. Helping implement fuel reduction projects like fuel breaks through things like thinning, chipping, with a focus on both managing the land, protecting properties and communities. Helping fund things that's relatively simple but important is like prescribed fire equipment trailers. These are resources that can be shared, kept stocked. These are things that communities have a hard time putting together, but an organization like conservation districts might help facilitate. Working with communities, there's a number of existing programs out there like Ready, Set, Go and Firewise USA and things like that that can help improve awareness in communities and help with planning to prepare for not only wildfires, but other kinds of disasters or events. Other fuel reduction activities can happen, especially in the wildland urban interface, facilitating partnerships with local fire departments, and even goal 3, working with fire departments to assist them or get them to work on community planning, supporting training for wildland fire, working with the states, prescribed fire councils, fire departments. And we've got some examples of forming wildland fire modules or crews made up of fire departments, where their focus is on wildland fire and prescribed fire, not just traditional fire response. So those are just some ideas of the kinds of things I see that conservation districts could potentially participate in. So that's it.
That's a great list, Larry.
Okay.
A good presentation. There are a couple questions in the chat. I'll go ahead and read those off. First from Leanne, the Northeast strategy, does it have implementation activities broken down by each state or subregions, or does it still reside at a 20 state regional level?
Well, it's kind of both. There is on our website, we do have a national or a regional action plan that has a whole bunch of specific activities outlined in it, and even identified who potentially, these kind of activities are sort of targeted to. But the next step I would recommend is going to the states, your state forestry, your state fire organization. They also have state forest action plans, which are, they just put out their recent updates, and many of them, most of them, incorporated some of the actions that were recommended for the cohesive strategy in the Northeast. So I would recommend working with your states.
Right, that sounds good. And I was going to say, we'll hear more from the DNR, Department of Natural Resources, Minnesota, a little bit, in just a little bit. And then I would also add that a lot of the times, because this is a regional 20 state level strategy, it really takes someone, from the state DNR or the county level, if they're a very active land management focused county. A lot of the times they'll be maybe in their hazard mitigation plans and such, that they'll have work with fire departments and try to get more public education out there for engaging and becoming volunteers and such. But
right. In fact, one of the drivers, among many others, for the regional risk assessment and portal we've been talking about is to support those all hazard state level and county level mitigation plans.
mm-hmm.
We know from experience that wildfire related kinds of activities haven't been well represented in some of the previous plans, and we're trying to use this assessment and portal initiative to help raise the bar on those kind of things.
Right. And we'll hear more from David Hosak from FEMA in a little bit. And I think he touches on those. So definitely some good points.